Dance this waltz, Maid, or stay nothing forever, the billionaire laughed, making the entire ballroom erupt as eyes turned to Anna Williams in her maid's uniform. They waited for a clumsy joke to mock, but when the music began, Anna's flawless steps froze the hall. Within seconds, everyone realized in shock she was no ordinary maid, but a former international waltz champion. Anna stood in the corner of the ballroom, her tray balanced in one hand, her brown hair falling loose over her shoulders. She wore a plain black dress, a white apron tied tight, and scuffed canvas shoes that had seen better days. Her face was gentle, no makeup, just a quiet beauty that didn't beg for attention. She'd been pouring wine all night, moving through the crowd like a shadow. But shadows don't always stay unseen. 10 years ago, she'd been someone else. Anna Williams, the girl who danced under spotlights, her name on banners, her parents cheering from the front row. Then a car crash took them, left her with nothing but a box of medals and a life to rebuild. She was 16 alone, and the world didn't care. She took this job to survive, to keep her head down, to disappear. But tonight, disappearing wasn't an option. The ballroom was a sea of wealth, all crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed walls, the kind of place where people wore their status like armor. Anna had felt their eyes all evening, sharp and judging, slicing through her plain clothes and rough hands. She'd heard their whispers about her shoes, her apron, her nerve to exist in their space. She kept moving, refilling glasses, dodging their words like she had dodged pain her whole life. But pain has a way of catching up. She'd stepped too close to the dance floor, just a moment's mistake, and now every face turned her way, their smiles cruel, their laughter ready. Hey, if you're watching this, grab your phone for a second. Hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means everything to share these stories with you, to feel you with us through every step. Let's keep going. It started with a woman in a red gown, Claire Hammond, her diamonds catching the light like tiny blades. She was the kind who smiled while twisting the knife, her voice loud enough to carry. That uniform, such an eyesore, she said, sipping her champagne, her friends nodding like a chorus. A young guy, Ethan Carver, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and a Rolex that screamed he was trying too hard, stepped closer. "Do you think you're worthy of stepping onto this floor?" he said, his smirk daring her to speak. The group around him laughed sharp and loud, like they'd just found their entertainment for the night. Anna didn't look up. She poured wine, her hands steady, but her fingers tightened on the bottle just for a second. She stepped back away from the dance floor, but the eyes followed her. A woman in a sapphire dress, Lydia Pierce, leaned against a pillar, her manicured nails tapping her glass. She was the kind who thrived on being the loudest in the room, her laughter a performance for anyone watching. "Look at her thinking she's invisible," she said, her voice dripping with mock pity. She turned to her friend, a man in a velvet jacket, and added, "Bet she's never even seen a ballroom before tonight." The man chuckled, his eyes scanning Anna like she was a mislaid prop. Anna's jaw tightened just a fraction as she adjusted a napkin on her tray. She moved to another table, but Lydia's voice followed, loud and deliberate. "Careful, don't trip on that rag you call a dress," she called out, sparking another round of laughter. Anna paused, her hand hovering over a glass, then poured with the same steady motion, her silence louder than their noise. Then Alexander Grant, the billionaire who owned this mansion, clapped his hands. The room went still, every head turning to him. He was tall, silver hair swept back his suit sharp enough to cut through the noise. His voice was calm, but commanding, the kind that didn't need to shout. "Since you're standing so close, then dance," he said, pointing at Anna. Whispers broke out like a wave. A maid waltzing. "Ridiculous," someone muttered. People stepped back, forming a loose circle around her, their faces a mix of amusement and pity. Anna raised her head just enough for the chandelier light to catch her eyes. There was a flicker there. Not fear, not defiance, just something alive, something waiting. Claire Hammond wasn't letting it go. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like a countdown. "I paid for professional performers, not a maid." She snapped, her voice slicing through the murmurs. A man in a tux, Robert Klein, his face red from too much wine, joined in. "She probably doesn't even know how to turn on beat," he said, chuckling like it was a private joke. A younger guy, Jason Tate, barely out of college, pulled out his phone, his grin wide. "This will go viral. Clumsy maid dancing," he said, already filming, his thumb hovering over the record button. Anna set her tray down on a side table, her movements slow like she was measuring the weight of their words. She stepped onto the polished floor, and the crowd leaned in, waiting for her to crumble. The orchestra started the waltz notes soft at first, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Anna moved her steps careful but sure, her arms lifting just enough to frame her body. The crowd laughed, quick and harsh. "Look, she's faking it." "A woman in a silver dress," Margaret Lyle muttered, her pearls gleaming. But then Anna's feet glided one step, flowing into the next, her body turning with a grace that didn't match her worn shoes. The laughter stuttered. Margaret clutched her pearls, her mouth half open. Jason's phone dipped an inch, his grin faltering. Anna's steps were perfect, each one landing exactly where the music asked her, canvas shoes silent on the wood. As Anna turned a man in a pinstripe suit, Gregory Holt pushed through the circle, his voice sharp with impatience. He was a hedge fund manager, the kind who measured people by their net worth, his watch heavier than his conscience. "This is a waste of time," he barked loud enough for the orchestra to falter. "She's making a mockery of this event." He turned to Alexander expecting agreement, but got none. Anna didn't pause. She swept into a low dip, her body steady, her eyes fixed on a point beyond the crowd. Gregory scoffed louder. "Now, what's next?" the caterer's juggling. A few laughed, but it was thin, nervous. Anna rose from the dip, her movements unbroken, and for a moment her gaze brushed Gregory's. He stepped back, his scoff caught in his throat as her steps carved the floor with quiet authority. A man in a navy suit, Harold Vance, his voice loud and brash, crossed his arms. "Just a few moves she memorized," he shouted, waving a hand like he could dismiss her. Claire nodded her chin high. "Wait, she'll slip soon enough," she said, her voice sharp with certainty. A couple nearby turned away, their laughter forced, like they needed to prove they weren't impressed. "International guests will find this ridiculous," Robert said, loud enough for Anna to hear. The MC, a nervous guy in a bow tie named Tom, stepped forward, his hand raised to stop the music. But Anna didn't stop. She spun into the hardest part of the waltz, her body moving like it was born for this. Her steps sharp and fluid, unstoppable. Her turn was perfect, her plain dress flaring like it was silk. The orchestra, caught off guard, sped up to match her, the violins racing, the cellos deep and urgent. A woman in the back, her green dress shimmering, whispered, "Only a champion could move like that." Jason's hands shook as he tried to keep filming, his phone trembling. The room went quiet, not a laugh left, just the music and Anna's steps. She didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge their stares. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes burned with something fierce, something that had been buried for years. Every move was a statement, every turn a quiet defiance. Halfway through the waltz, a woman in a gold gown, Evelyn Marsh, clutched her husband's arm, her voice high and brittle. She was a gallery owner, her life built on spotting fakes, and she wasn't ready to believe this. "She's got to be a plant," she hissed, her eyes darting to Alexander. "This is staged, isn't it? Some publicity stunt." Her husband, a quiet man with tired eyes, didn't answer, but the crowd nearby murmured agreement. Anna's steps didn't falter. She spun, her arms arcing like wings, and the chandelier light caught her silhouette, making her shadow dance across the walls. Evelyn's voice cracked. "She can't be real." Anna landed her next step with a precision that silenced the murmurs, her plain shoes a quiet rebuke to every doubt. The crowd was fracturing now, some still holding on to their doubts. Harold, his gray beard bristling, stepped closer to the circle. "If she's truly skilled, why be a maid?" he demanded, his voice booming. Margaret sniffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Probably a dropout from some academy," she said, adjusting her shawl like it could shield her from being wrong. Robert, his tie loose, laughed, but it was shaky. "We're being tricked," he said, glancing around for agreement. Anna stopped right in the center of the floor. The music paused, the silence heavy, like the room was holding its breath. She lifted her head, her gaze steady, and the space felt smaller, like she had claimed it all. Alexander stepped forward, his smile sharp but warm. "Allow me to introduce," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "the 2015 International Waltz champion, Anna Williams." Gasps broke out, sharp and scattered. "God, it's her." The woman in the green dress whispered, her hand over her mouth. An older woman, her earrings glinting, swayed like she might faint. The one who vanished after the tournament. Tom, the MC, fumbled his microphone, and it hit the floor with a dull thud. Anna didn't react. She just bowed her head, a small, quiet gesture, like she was letting their shock roll past her. Years ago, she'd stood on a stage in Vienna, lights blazing, her parents in the front row. She was 19, her dress sapphire blue, her partner's hand steady in hers. They'd won gold that night, the crowd roaring, her mother's eyes wet with pride. 2 weeks later, a drunk driver took them both. Anna had walked away from the medals, the stages, the life. She'd packed her dresses, sold what she could, and disappeared into a world that didn't ask for her name. She'd worked in kitchens, cleaned houses, poured wine, anything to keep going. She hadn't danced since not until tonight. Harold wasn't done. If she's a champion, why pour wine? He demanded, his voice thick with disbelief. Margaret added, her lips tight. Titles don't erase poverty. Their words hung in the air, cold and sharp, trying to pull her back down. Anna didn't answer. She stood there, her hands folded, her eyes glowing with something that wasn't anger, but wasn't surrender either. The room felt heavy, like it was waiting for her to break. She didn't. She just looked at Harold, her gaze steady, and he shifted his arms, dropping to his sides. As the orchestra started again, softer now, Anna walked off the floor, her steps measured, her apron still tied. A waiter, young and wide-eyed, handed her a glass of water, his hands trembling like he'd just seen a miracle. That was incredible, he whispered, barely audible over the music. Anna took the glass, her fingers brushing his, and gave a small nod. Thank you, she said, her voice low, like it was just for him. She sipped the water, her eyes drifting to the crowd, now whispering her name. The waiter lingered like he wanted to say more, but Anna turned away, setting the glass down with a quiet clink, her focus already elsewhere. Alexander turned to the crowd, his face unreadable. From today, she is no longer a maid, he said. Anna will be my artistic partner and co-director of the Cultural Foundation. The words landed like a stone in water ripples spreading. The laughter was gone, replaced by a silence that pressed against the walls. Anna took his hand of her grip firm and bowed to the orchestra. The musicians nodded back, their faces lit with respect. Jason stopped filming, his phone slipping into his pocket. Claire stared at her empty glass, her face pale, her diamonds suddenly dull. The clip from that night went viral by morning. It was on ex-YouTube news sites everywhere. From Maid to Queen of the Waltz, the headline screamed. People shared it, commented, argued. Some called it staged, others called it a miracle. Anna didn't look at any of it. She was back in her small apartment, a one-room place with a sagging couch and a box of medals under her bed. She sat at her table, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, the city humming outside. The world had seen her, but she wasn't chasing its attention. Claire Hammond, the woman in the red gown, owned a chain of boutiques, her name synonymous with elegance. She'd built her life on being untouchable, her smile a carefully crafted weapon. By noon, her assistant was panicking, showing her the clip on X, already at 2 million views. Sponsors started calling their voices clipped. They didn't like being linked to someone who'd mocked a champion. Claire posted an apology online, her words stiff and rehearsed, but the comments tore it apart. Too late, one read. Her biggest contract, a luxury brand, pulled out by evening. She canceled her next public appearance, her phone silent for days. Ethan Carver, the guy with the Rolex, thought he'd slipped through. He'd laughed the loudest, his voice cutting over the music. But his tech startup had investors who hated bad press. Someone tagged him in the video, his name spreading like a stain. By Friday, he was called into a meeting, his CEO's face grim. He was out of a job by Monday, his LinkedIn profile wiped clean. He tried to joke about it at a bar downtown, but his friends, the ones who cheered him on, stopped answering his texts. He sat alone in his Rolex, ticking louder than the conversation. Harold Vance, the man with the gray beard, owned half the city's skyline. He'd been so sure Anna was nothing, his voice booming with authority. But the Cultural Foundation where Anna now worked had ties to his biggest projects. A quiet phone call, a single meeting, and his latest deal, a high-rise he'd banked on, fell apart. Nobody mentioned Anna's name, but he knew. He saw her face in every headline, her steps on every screen. He stopped showing up at galas, his office suddenly too quiet. Margaret Lyle, the woman in the silver dress, had lived for the spotlight, her name in every gossip column. But the clip showed her sneering, her words sharp and small. People didn't forget. Her invitations stopped coming. Her name dropped from the lists. She posted a photo on Instagram smiling at a charity event, but the comments were brutal. You called her a dropout, one said. She deleted the post, then her account, her phone screen dark for the first time in years. In a quiet moment after the gala, Anna stood by a window, the city lights blurring below. A janitor, an older man with a limp, paused his sweeping to watch her. You showed him, he said, his voice rough but warm, like he had carried his own battles. Anna turned, her eyes meeting his, and for the first time that night, her lips curved into a faint smile. Just did my job, she said, her voice soft but clear. The janitor chuckled, shaking his head, and went back to his broom, the bristles whispering against the floor. Anna adjusted her bag, her fingers brushing the worn strap, and stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft hum. Anna didn't see most of this. She was too busy already at the foundation's office, sorting through proposals for the next event. She wore a plain sweater, her hair loose, her face bare. People moved differently around her now, their steps lighter, their voices softer. She didn't smile more, didn't talk louder. She just kept working her pen, moving across papers, her focus sharp. But sometimes her hand paused, her eyes drifting to the window, the city stretching out below. One morning she found a photo in a folder, an old one. Her in that sapphire dress, her parents' faces blurred but smiling. She was 19, the stage lights warmed the crowd, a blur of applause. Her mother had hugged her after her father's hand heavy on her shoulder. She'd felt unstoppable. The photo trembled in her fingers just for a second before she slid it back and closed the folder. The office was quiet, just the hum of the air conditioner. She picked up her pen and kept going, but her movements were slower, like she was carrying something heavy. The next event was a small concert, a fundraiser for local artists. The room was packed, the air thick with whispers when Anna walked in. She wore a black sweater, simple slacks, no jewelry. People watched her, waiting for a speech, a gesture, something to explain her. She didn't give them one. She stood by the stage checking the schedule, her pen tapping lightly on the clipboard. A young woman, maybe a volunteer, approached her, hands twisting nervously. "Ms. Williams," she said. Anna looked up, nodded. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice catching. "For what you did." Anna tilted her head just a fraction. "I just danced," she said, her voice soft but steady, and went back to her notes. The whispers grew when Alexander arrived. He didn't need to announce himself. His presence changed. The room made people stand straighter, their voices quieter. He was in a dark suit, his silver hair catching the light, his face calm but unreadable. He nodded to a few people, but his eyes found Anna. She didn't rush to him, didn't make a scene. She set her clipboard down, walked over her steps, even her hands loose. The room watched, but she didn't seem to notice. He took her hand just for a moment, and the whispers stopped. Nobody needed to say his name. They knew. A man in the corner, one of the ones who'd laughed that night, tried to recover. Mr. Grant, always a pleasure," he said, his smile too wide, his hand outstretched. Alexander looked at him, didn't take the hand. "Good to see you," he said, his voice flat. The man's smile faltered and he stepped back, his face red. Margaret, who'd sneered at Anna's shoes, froze when their eyes met. She looked away, her fingers twisting her necklace until the clasp broke, the pearls scattering across the floor. Anna didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The concert was beautiful, the music soft and warm, filling the room like a memory. Anna stood in the back, her arms crossed, watching the stage. A little girl, maybe 8, tugged at her sleeve. "Are you the dancer?" she asked, her eyes wide. Anna crouched down, her face softening just a little. "I used to be," she said. The girl grinned, holding out a crumpled program. "Can you sign it?" Anna hesitated, then took the pen, her signature small and neat. The girl ran off, clutching the paper like it was gold. Later, Anna stood outside, the night air cool against her face. The city lights stretched out a hum of life she didn't need to chase. She adjusted her bag, the strap worn, but sturdy, and started walking. Her steps were the same steady quiet. Sure, the world had changed around her, but she hadn't. She didn't need their applause, their regret, their validation. She had danced for herself that night, and that was enough. But the world wasn't done with her. The foundation grew its events, drawing bigger crowds, more eyes. Anna was at every one quiet, but present her name now, a whisper of its own. She didn't seek the spotlight, but it found her. People approached her, hesitant, their voices soft. "I saw the video," a man said once, his tie crooked, his eyes earnest. "You were amazing." Anna nodded, her lips barely curving. "Thank you," she said, and moved on, her clipboard tucked under her arm. One afternoon she was in a meeting, papers spread across a table. A colleague, an older woman with kind eyes, set a coffee cup in front of her. "You don't talk about it," the woman said, her voice gentle. Anna looked up, her pen, pausing. "Nothing to say?" she replied, her tone even. The woman smiled like she understood. Anna went back to her work, but the coffee cup sat untouched, steam curling into the air. Another night, another event. This one was bigger, a gala for the foundation's new art program. Anna was backstage checking the lighting cues, her hair tied back with a simple clip. A young man, a new hire, watched her from across the room. "She's the one, right?" he whispered to a coworker. The coworker nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, but don't stare." Anna caught their glances, didn't react. She adjusted a wire, her hands steady, and moved to the next task. The stage manager called her name, and she answered without looking up, her voice calm like she'd always been here. The gala was a success, the room filled with applause. Anna stood to the side, her arms crossed, watching the artists take their bows. A woman in the audience, her dress glittering, leaned over to her friend. "That's her, isn't it?" she whispered. Anna didn't hear, or if she did, she didn't show it. She checked her watch, made a note, and slipped out a side door. The night air hit her like a sigh, the city humming its endless song. Weeks later, she was at a small community center, helping set up for a dance workshop. Kids ran around their sneakers, squeaking on the floor. Anna knelt to tie a girl's shoe, her hands gentle but firm. "You dance?" the girl asked, her braid swinging. Anna paused, her fingers still on the laces. Sometimes she said, her voice soft. The girl grinned like she'd just been let in on a secret. Anna stood brushing her hands on her slacks and handed the girl a flyer. "Come back next week," she said, and walked away, her steps as steady as ever. The video never stopped circulating. It popped up in feeds and group chats and late-night talk show segments. People watched, it rewatched, it shared it again. Anna didn't. She didn't need to see herself to know who she was. But sometimes, late at night, she'd open that box under her bed, her medals cold in her hands. She had traced the edges, the weight familiar, and then closed the lid. The past was hers, but she wasn't living in it. One evening she was leaving the foundation's office, her bag slung over her shoulder. A car passed, an old blue sedan, just like the one her dad used to drive. She stopped, her breath catching just for a moment. The street was quiet, the air cool. She adjusted her bag and kept walking, her steps a little slower, like she was carrying that memory with her. The next big event was a charity ball, the kind of night where the city's elite turned out in force. Anna was there, not in a gown, but in a simple black dress, her hair loose, her face bare. People watched her, their eyes curious, some respectful, some still unsure. She moved through the room, checking details, her clipboard, a quiet shield. A man approached, his suit expensive, his smile cautious. "Mrs. Williams, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. Anna looked at him, her expression unreadable. "It's done," she said, and moved on her steps, even her focus unbroken. At the charity ball, a young woman in a lavender gown, Sophia Reed, hovered near Anna, her fingers twisting a cocktail napkin. She was an influencer, her life, a curated feed of perfection, but her eyes were nervous now. I posted about you," she said, her voice barely above the music. "I didn't know who you were." Anna glanced at her, her pen pausing mid-note. The napkin in Sophia's hand was shredded, tiny pieces fluttering to the floor. "You don't owe me anything," Anna said, her voice steady, and turned back to her clipboard. Sophia stood there frozen, then walked away, her heels unsteady, like she'd just lost something she couldn't name. The crowd didn't notice, but Anna's shoulders relaxed just a fraction as she moved to the next task. Alexander was there, as always, his presence a quiet anchor. He didn't hover, didn't make a show. He just stood near her, his hand brushing hers for a moment as they passed. The room noticed, but Anna didn't seem to. She was too busy, her pen moving across her notes, her eyes scanning the crowd. A woman in the back, her dress sparkling, whispered to her friend, "She's his partner, right?" The friend nodded, her eyes wide. Anna didn't hear, or if she did, she didn't care. She was already moving to the next task, her steps as sure as they'd been on the dance floor. The night ended, the guests gone, the ballroom quiet. Anna stood by the stage gathering her papers. Alexander walked over, his suit jacket off his sleeves, rolled up. "Good work," he said, his voice low. Anna nodded, her lips curving just a fraction. "You too," she said, and they stood there, the silence comfortable, like they'd done this 100 times. He didn't say more, didn't need to. She picked up her bag, adjusted the strap, and walked out, her steps echoing in the empty room. "You've been there, haven't you? Looked down on, counted out, judged for what you didn't show. You stood tall anyway, carried your truth in your silence. You weren't wrong for staying steady. You weren't alone in that fight. And you're still here, moving forward, just like she did." Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.